Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach TaskBox Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, special education teachers, and welcome back to another episode of Teach TaskBox Inspire. I'm your host, Lisa Holiday, and today I want to talk about something that I don't usually talk about, and that's executive functioning skills. So I am in a brand new classroom this year, and it is a fifth grade, not self-contained anymore. So I am in an inclusion classroom. So that means some of my students have an IEP and some students do not. So it is a blended classroom. We do move around a lot going to different classrooms, but I have students that really struggle on executive functioning skills. And so that's why I wanted to address that today. So why the heck is teaching and reinforcing these skills so important? So really, no matter the subject, there's always a way to kind of tie in those executive functioning skills to everyday lessons. I want you to understand that there are key brain functions that really help us plan, get started, stay focused, and overcome everyday obstacles. So by kind of recognizing those important skills, students can better understand the strategies that kind of lead to that success, right? So one key takeaway is that executive functioning skills are kind of woven into everything that we do. We rely on planning when solving, multi-step math problems, which we're doing a lot of in fifth grade. We use organization skills when we're putting, stuff in and out of our locker, when we're going from one class to another. We use a lot of our time management. That comes into play when we're deciding how to spend time during study hall, or maybe how to spend time, whether we're doing math groups and you have to decide, do I need to do the math game or do I need to work with a teacher? So talking openly about executive functioning is really the first step in helping these students recognize the value behind that. And I do plan on, when I pull my kids to my own classroom, so I do have 8 identified students, when I'm able to pull those students in, we can kind of hone in on these skills as well. Okay, so there are 9 different executive functioning skills that really help students. Number 1 is self-regulation and is super key to a lot of my students. So I'm talking about managing their emotions, their behaviors. Whether a student is frustrated or bored, these self-regulation skills will help them refocus and stay on task. So when kids can manage their emotions, they're better able to focus and complete their tasks effectively. So you might be thinking, okay, Lisa, how do I teach it? I want you to introduce and practice coping strategies like deep breathing or positive self-talk, or having some sort of visuals in front of them to identify where they are. Is it a big problem? Is it a small problem? So another thing that you can do is build in meaningful breaks to help students kind of recharge and get their self-regulation skills in check. So I have a student who I send down to the library right now, and he takes a little break to visit the lizard or gecko that we have in the library, which is amazing. It takes him 5 minutes. He takes a little timer. He goes down, visits it, and comes back. This helps his brain kind of restart or get ready for math or whatever subject is coming up. Another way to teach this is you can talk through real life situations to kind of reinforce this idea of stopping and thinking before reacting. A lot of times I have to tell the student that it is a small problem. We don't want to make it a big problem by overreacting. Number 2 is planning. So planning involves kind of creating a roadmap to achieve a goal. Sometimes it has 1 or 2 steps. Sometimes it has, multi-steps. It's 4, 5, 6 steps. And I'm talking about homework assignments to long-term projects or just getting your binder in order. So having that planning. So students that struggle with planning tend to, dive into tasks without clear direction. They're just starting from the bottom or just putting things on paper. We want to reduce mistakes and having to start all over. So we really want to introduce how to plan things. So using things like apps or calendars or planners to kind of help students plan things. Also, I like checklists. Checklists have been like my go-to for students. There is I can put it in the link in the show notes, but there's this little check thing that I bought for one of my students that helps this person with their planning. So first we're going to do this, 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 and this. And he moves the little checkbox over and he loves that. Another thing is organization. This is huge. And I don't know why, because of 5th grade, I'm seeing it all over the place, but their lockers, their desks, everything is disorganized. And we want students to be able to easily find what they need, whether it's their homework or a paper that the teacher told you to take out, or whether it's a pencil. I mean, in 5th grade right now, I can't tell you how many times somebody says, I don't have a pencil. So this cuts down on a lot of that wasted time and frustration because I have students getting very frustrated. So how do we teach it? You want to explicitly show students how to organize their materials. So maybe they have a special binder, a Trapper Keeper or whatnot. Maybe you have a visual model of what their desk should look like. Maybe you have a visual notebook for what their notebook should look like. Or using graphic organizers to kind of help students organize their thoughts is also really helpful. All right, number 4 is goal setting. So goal setting is really about identifying what you want to achieve and making a plan to get there. This is really hard if you don't have that organization or planning skills first, but goal setting would be next. So you want to teach students how to do that after they've mastered those specific executive functioning skills. All right, the next one, number 5, would be time management. So managing time wisely helps students work smarter, not harder, right? It's the skill that enables them to kind of prioritize and complete tasks efficiently. So you want to kind of help students estimate how long tasks are going to take. I use a lot of visual timers. So whether it's a cell phone timer or a time timer that you bought off Amazon or a little kitchen timer that you found at the dollar store, it does not matter. Using those timers to help manage time is really helpful for these students. You also want to help them break long-term projects into smaller chunks and kind of create mini deadlines. For example, in our math class right now, the teacher hands out the homework, and it's usually one sheet, about 9 or 10 problems, that they have all week to do. And the students that really stick out is those students who wait till Thursday night to get all of their homework done. And so what I do is I like to sit down with some of my students who have a problem with time management and say, okay, on Monday, I want you to do problems 1 through 3. And then on Tuesday, I want you to do problems 4 through 6. This helps them understand, okay, this is how I manage my time correctly. And you want to teach students to constantly ask themselves, check in with themselves. Am I doing okay? How is my time? Am I on track? All right, the next thing, number 6, is prioritizing. This is a great executive functioning skill. So knowing which tasks are more important and kind of tackling them first. We kind of see a lot of this happening when students are like, oh, I'm going to do the crossword puzzle first, and then I'll get to the rest of my tasks. And that's kind of where we want to change that. So we want to give students choices during work sessions so that they can practice that prioritizing. And so, for example, during math, we do a lot of math workshop where students get to choose, is it tech time? Is it hands-on time, which is usually a game? Is it time for their worksheet? And they all know that the tech kind of comes last because they can always work on IXL or boom cards or whatever it is you have them doing. However, you need to make sure that you're doing, X, Y, and Z first. So I like to use okay, first you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, 1, 2, and 3. So we kind of rank tasks in order of importance, and I help decide which comes first for them. Number 7 is perseverance. And this is really hard to teach because you need to push through the challenges to kind of reach whatever goal you have in mind, right? And when we talk about academics, perseverance really helps students stick with those tough tasks and learn new skills. The problem is a lot of our students who are identified do not like to learn new skills, especially if they're just being pushed on, because they usually have a huge gap. So perseverance is really hard to teach. What I like to do is we discuss things for different strategies to kind of get unstuck when a challenge comes up, like asking for help or taking a break. We don't want our students to kind of rip the paper up or throw the notebook on the floor or smash all the math manipulatives to the ground, right? We want them to use strategies to say, okay, I'm stuck and now I'm frustrated. What can I do to help? So sometimes we practice this by I give them something I know is hard for them. And I put a little visual in front of them that says, when I'm stuck, raise your hand, or when I'm stuck, take a break. And this helps them. And so I can see them getting frustrated and I'll point to the visual. All right, number 8 is problem solving. Problem solving is really about understanding the challenge and finding that solution. So obviously we can use this in academics and in life in general. There are problems that come up even in my adult life, and you have to have skills to kind of understand what the challenge is and find that solution. So I teach it by we really break down problems into manageable steps. I like to do this kind of as things come up. So we call those teachable moments. As things come up, I try to help them put it into more manageable steps so that they can problem solve and kind of reflect on what strategies work best for them. All right, the last executive functioning skill I'm going to talk about is flexibility. Now, being flexible means kind of adapting to changes or even setbacks without getting frustrated or overwhelmed. This is really hard for students that are autistic because it's just not in their nature to be flexible. So you have to teach them flexibility. You want to incorporate activities that kind of require students to kind of think on their feet. You also want to build in interruptions into their schedule. So if something is happening throughout the day, you want to sit down with them and say, there's not going to be speech today. We don't have speech. So that's a change in your schedule. I know that can be frustrating. And then teach them strategies to go back to, how to regulate their emotions. So by teaching and reinforcing these executive functioning skills, we can help our students develop strategies that not only kind of boost their academic performance, but this is going to prepare them for real life outside of the classroom. I love that you were here for this one. I usually don't talk a ton about executive functioning skills because I was always in a self-contained setting. And even though a lot of my students were lacking these skills, it was really hard to work on them in the K-1-2 setting when students are nonverbal and a lot of their behavior needed to be managed before we started working on these skills. But that's all I have for now. If you have any questions, always reach out to me. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode today. Until next time, guys, bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, TaskBox, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, task boxing, and inspiring.